The boardroom gleamed with arrogance, chandeliers casting golden light across mahogany tables where executives in $1,000 suits sipped imported water. At the back, Ethan Carter stood in his faded blue shirt and scuffed work boots, clutching folders yellowed with age. Damian Cross's lips curled into a sneer, his diamond watch catching the light as he gestured dismissively. "You'll never belong here," he announced, and laughter rippled through the room like poison. Isabella Sterling sat at the head of the table, her ice-blue eyes watching with calculated detachment. The humiliation hung thick, suffocating until Ethan's jaw tightened, and his voice rose clear and unwavering, cutting through their mockery with words that would haunt them forever. What happens next will turn humiliation into awe, as a single dad defies every prejudice and shakes the very foundations of power itself. The morning sun hadn't yet touched the cramped apartment where Ethan Carter knelt beside his daughter's bed, gently shaking her shoulder. "Time to wake up, sunshine," he whispered, his calloused hands careful not to startle her. Lily's eyes fluttered open, immediately bright with the kind of joy that poverty couldn't dim. At 36, Ethan carried himself with the quiet dignity of a man who'd lost everything except what mattered most. His shoulders, broad from years of manual labor, bore invisible weight that would have crushed lesser men. He moved through their morning routine with practiced efficiency, braiding Lily's golden curls while she hummed a song her mother used to sing. Packing her lunch with an apple he'd saved from his own meal, checking her homework one more time. The apartment was small, just 2 rooms with peeling wallpaper and a radiator that clanged like a ghost, but Ethan had made it a home. Lily's drawings covered every wall, transforming water stains into clouds and cracks into rivers of imagination. "Daddy, will you pick me up after school today?" Lily asked, swinging her legs as she sat at their wobbly kitchen table. "Always, sweetheart. Have I ever missed it?" "Never," she beamed. And that smile, Sarah's smile, made every sacrifice worthwhile. Ethan had once been different. 8 years ago, he'd been a rising star in mechanical engineering, his mind crackling with innovations that could have changed the world. Companies had courted him, professors had called him brilliant, and the future had stretched before him like an open highway. But when Sarah got sick, when the cancer came like a thief in the night, Ethan made his choice without hesitation. He'd walked away from 6-figure offers, from patents and presentations, from everything that had defined him professionally. He'd become her nurse, her comfort, her anchor in the storm. For 3 years, he'd held her hand through chemotherapy, through sleepless nights, through hope and despair. And when she finally slipped away on a Tuesday morning, taking his heart with her, Ethan had been left with 2 things: crushing debt from medical bills, and a 4-year-old daughter who needed him to be both mother and father. The engineering world had moved on without him. 3 years absent from the field might as well have been 30. His connections had evaporated, his reputation forgotten. Pride had no place in survival, so Ethan took whatever work he could find: janitor at an office building, weekend shifts at a warehouse, anything that kept food on Lily's plate, and a roof over her head. Across the city, in a glass tower that scraped the sky, Isabella Sterling stood before floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city wake beneath her. At 34, she commanded an empire built on innovation and ruthlessness. Her platinum blonde hair fell in perfect waves over shoulders wrapped in a red dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary. The dress, as always, was her armor, a scarlet declaration of power that made board members stumble over their words and competitors second-guess their strategies. Isabella had everything and nothing. Her penthouse was a museum of success awards, magazine covers, photographs with world leaders, but it echoed with loneliness. She'd traded love for leverage, relationships for revenue, and now stood at the pinnacle of achievement, wondering why victory tasted like ash. "The board meeting is in an hour," her assistant announced through the intercom. "Send Damian Cross in when he arrives," Isabella replied, her voice carrying the kind of authority that made grown men nervous. Damian Cross was everything Ethan wasn't: polished, political, and poisonous. At 40, he'd climbed the corporate ladder not through innovation but through manipulation. His pale skin seemed almost translucent under the office lights, his gray eyes calculating every interaction for maximum advantage. The silver-gray suit he wore today had been chosen specifically to project sophistication, but there was something reptilian about how he moved, how he smiled without warmth. "Isabella," he purred as he entered her office, "I trust you've reviewed my proposal." "I have." She turned from the window, her expression unreadable. "It lacks originality." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Perhaps you'd prefer the innovations of someone more grounded?" "I heard you're entertaining proposals from anyone these days. Even the janitor thinks he has ideas now." Isabella's eyes narrowed. She'd heard about Ethan Carter's request to present at the board meeting, a request Damian had clearly orchestrated to be as humiliating as possible. It was unlike Damian to allow such disruption unless he had an agenda. Everyone deserves to be heard, she said carefully. Of course, Damian smiled, and in that smile was a promise of cruelty. I'm sure it will be educational. 10 years ago, Ethan had been on the verge of changing everything. In a cluttered garage that served as his laboratory, he'd developed a revolutionary combustion engine design that could have reduced emissions by 70% while doubling efficiency. The prototype had worked flawlessly, the patents had been filed, and a major automotive company had shown interest. But patents took time, and in that window of vulnerability, something had happened that Ethan still didn't fully understand. The company had suddenly withdrawn interest. His patent application had been rejected on a technicality. Within weeks, a similar design had appeared under another company's banner, a company with connections to firms that would later employ Damian Cross. Ethan had tried to fight, but fighting required lawyers, and lawyers required money he didn't have. When Sarah's diagnosis came 3 months later, the fight no longer mattered. What Ethan didn't know was that his engine design hadn't just been stolen, it had been buried. Damian's network had ensured it never saw production, protecting existing interests from disruption. But one piece of Ethan's work had slipped through a small safety innovation that had been incorporated into a line of luxury vehicles. 3 years ago, one of those vehicles had saved Isabella Sterling's life, when her car's revolutionary crumple zone based on Ethan's design had absorbed the impact of a collision that should have killed her. She'd never known the name of the engineer behind it. To her, it was just another feature in a car worth more than most homes. But fate has a way of connecting threads across time and circumstance, weaving patterns only visible in hindsight. The company Isabella had built from her father's small firm into a technology giant was now under siege. Stock prices had plummeted 18% in 3 weeks. 3 major contracts had fallen through under mysterious circumstances. Board members whispered about leadership changes, and Damian Cross was always there, offering sympathy with one hand while sharpening knives with the other. She'd traced some of the sabotage to internal leaks, but proving Damian's involvement was like catching smoke. He was too careful, too connected, and the board was losing patience with her inability to stop the bleeding. If the next quarter's reports showed continued losses, they'd have the votes to remove her. Meanwhile, in a manila envelope that had arrived that morning, Ethan faced his own crisis. The eviction notice was formal, final 30 days to pay 3 months back rent or vacate. He'd been juggling bills like a desperate circus act, but there were only so many balls you could keep in the air before physics won. The janitorial job barely covered food and utilities. The warehouse had cut his hours. And Lily needed new shoes for school, needed supplies for her art class, needed the chance at a childhood that didn't taste like poverty. That's when he'd remembered the designs. Not the stolen engine that wound had scarred over, but something new he'd been working on in the few quiet hours between exhaustion and sleep. A revolutionary battery design that could extend electric vehicle range by 300%. He'd built it from necessity, trying to keep their ancient refrigerator running during power cuts, but the applications were limitless. Sterling Industries was holding an open innovation forum, a publicity stunt, really, where they claimed to welcome ideas from anyone. Ethan knew it was probably futile, knew someone like him would be laughed out of the room, but futility and hope sometimes looked identical when you were desperate enough. Ethan stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, water dripping from the faucet he couldn't afford to fix properly. The man looking back at him seemed older than 36, weathered by grief and ground down by struggle. But his eyes, brown and deep, still held something unbroken. Sarah had called it his stubborn streak. "You don't know how to quit," she'd said, half complaining, half admiring. "I don't want to quit, Daddy." He turned to find Lily in the doorway, holding up a math worksheet covered in eraser marks. "Then we won't quit," he said, kneeling down to her level. "Show me what's giving you trouble." As they worked through the problems together, Lily suddenly stopped. "Daddy, are we poor?" The question landed like a physical blow. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" Melissa at school said only poor kids wear the same shoes every day. Ethan pulled her close, feeling her small heart beating against his chest. "We have everything we need," he said carefully. "We have each other, we have love, and we have hope. Some people have more money, but that doesn't make them richer than us." "I think we're rich," Lily declared with 7-year-old certainty. "Because you're the best daddy, and that's worth more than all the money." That night, as Lily slept, Ethan refined his presentation one more time. He knew they'd mock him. A janitor presenting to executives was like a mouse addressing lions. But Lily's words echoed. "I don't want to quit." Isabella stood on her private balcony, city lights glittering below like fallen stars. The wine in her glass remained untouched. Tomorrow's board meeting would be crucial. She needed to project strength, control, unwavering leadership, but doubt crept in through cracks in her armor. Had she become so focused on winning that she'd forgotten what victory meant? Had power become its own purpose? Her phone buzzed. Damian. Looking forward to tomorrow's entertainment. The janitor's presentation should provide much-needed levity. She didn't reply. Something about his eagerness felt wrong, calculated. Isabella Sterling hadn't survived this long by ignoring her instincts, and her instincts said Damian was playing a game she didn't yet understand. The boardroom at Sterling Industries was designed to intimidate. Everything about it whispered power, from the 20-foot ceilings to the table carved from a single piece of Brazilian rosewood. Executives filed in like sharks scenting blood, each taking their prescribed place in the hierarchy. Damian arrived early, positioning himself where he could best orchestrate the humiliation to come. Ethan entered last, the contrast almost violent. His shirt, though clean and pressed, belonged to a different world than the Italian suits surrounding him. His folders looked like artifacts from another era, but he walked with his shoulders straight, meeting their stares without flinching. "Mr. Carter," Damian announced with false warmth, "how wonderful that you could take time from your duties to join us." A few executives chuckled. Isabella watched silently from her position at the head of the table, her expression carved from marble. "Thank you for the opportunity," Ethan replied, his voice steady. "By all means," Damian gestured grandly, "share your wisdom with us." Ethan opened his folder, revealing hand-drawn schematics that might have been artwork if they weren't so precisely technical. "I've developed a battery design that could revolutionize electric vehicles. The current limitation—" "Excuse me," Damian interrupted, "but don't you clean these floors at night?" "I'm curious about your qualifications to discuss advanced engineering." The room rippled with uncomfortable laughter. Someone whispered loud enough to be heard. "Maybe he found it in the trash." "My qualifications," Ethan said slowly, "are in the design itself." "If you'll allow me to explain." "This is absurd," another executive interjected. "We're wasting time listening to a janitor's fantasies." "He probably Googled it," someone else added. Earning more laughter, Damian stood, his performance reaching its crescendo. "Mr. Carter, while we appreciate your enthusiasm, this is a boardroom, not a charity. You don't belong here. You'll never belong here. Perhaps you should return to work you're actually qualified for." The words hung in the air like a public execution. Ethan's hands tightened on his folder, knuckles white. For a moment, rage flashed across his face, not for himself, but for every dismissed idea, every silenced voice, every person told they didn't matter because of their circumstances. "You're right," Ethan said, and the room leaned forward, sensing complete victory. "I don't belong here. Because here, you measure worth by suits and stock prices. You've forgotten that every innovation that built this company came from someone who saw the world differently. You mock me for being a janitor, but I've cleaned up enough of your messes to know that the real garbage isn't on the floors, it's in the thinking that says a person's value comes from their bank account." He turned to leave, then stopped. "My design would have saved your company. But you'll never know that, because you couldn't see past your own prejudice. When this company falls, and it will fall if you keep thinking this way, remember that you had the solution standing right in front of you, and you laughed it away." Isabella finally spoke, her voice cutting through the shocked silence. "The meeting is adjourned." Ethan walked out without looking back, leaving behind a room full of executives who suddenly found their expensive shoes very interesting. The snowstorm hit without warning, transforming the city into a white wasteland within hours. Isabella had stayed late, poring over quarterly reports that grew grimmer with each page. By the time she reached the parking garage, the world outside had become unrecognizable. Her driver had called in sick, and the few remaining employees had already fled before conditions worsened. She pulled out of the garage in her Tesla, its advanced systems immediately struggling against the ice. The normal 20-minute drive to her penthouse stretched into an hour of crawling progress. Then, on the Riverside Bridge, everything went wrong at once. The car in front of her spun out, clipping her front bumper and sending her vehicle into a slide. The Tesla's computers tried to compensate, but physics had taken over. She felt the sickening sensation of losing control as her car slid toward the bridge's edge, where only a low barrier separated the road from a 40-foot drop to the frozen river below. The impact wasn't violent, just a slow-motion crunch as her car pushed through the barrier and teetered on the edge. The front wheels hung in space. Any movement might tip the balance. Isabella sat frozen, afraid to even breathe, her hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. Through the swirling snow, she saw a figure running toward her, not from the abandoned cars ahead, but from behind, where an ancient pickup truck had stopped. The man moved with surprising agility across the ice, and as he got closer, Isabella's heart stopped. It was Ethan Carter. "Don't move," he shouted over the wind. The weight distribution is holding you, but barely. He disappeared from view, and for a terrifying moment, Isabella thought he'd left her. Then she felt the car shift slightly backward, safer. Ethan had attached a tow chain from his truck to her rear axle, but that alone wouldn't be enough. He appeared at her window, having to shout to be heard. "When I tell you, you need to shift your weight backward, slowly. Can you do that?" She nodded, terror making speech impossible. Ethan moved to the front of the car, and Isabella watched in horror as he actually pushed against the hood, adding his weight to keep the vehicle from tipping while he guided it back. His feet slipped on the ice, and more than once he nearly went over the edge himself. "Now," he shouted. Isabella leaned back, feeling the car's balance shift. Ethan pushed harder, his face contorted with effort, and inch by inch, the Tesla scraped backward onto solid ground. The moment all four wheels were on the bridge, Isabella scrambled out, her legs barely supporting her. Ethan was on his knees in the snow, exhausted. Without thinking, Isabella knelt beside him, her designer dress immediately soaked. "Why?" she asked, her voice breaking. "After what happened at the meeting, why would you?" "Because it was the right thing to do," he said simply, looking up at her with those brown eyes that held no hatred, no resentment. "Because you're a human being in trouble, and that's all that matters." As they knelt there in the snow, Isabella suddenly remembered something, a news article from 3 years ago about revolutionary safety features in her previous car. The one that had saved her life in a collision. The engineer's name had been buried in the technical details, but now, looking at Ethan's face, something clicked. "The crumple zone design," she whispered. "The one that saved me before. That was yours, wasn't it?" Ethan's eyes widened slightly, but he said nothing. "Get in my car," Isabella said, suddenly decisive. "We need to talk." Isabella's investigation started that night, and didn't stop for 3 days. She pulled records, traced patents, followed paper trails that had been deliberately obscured. What she found made her physically sick. Ethan's revolutionary engine design hadn't just been stolen, it had been systematically suppressed by a consortium of companies protecting their market share. And at the center of it all, like a spider in a web, was evidence of Damian Cross's involvement. But it went deeper. The safety innovation that had saved her life, Ethan had never received credit or compensation. The patent had been filed under a shell company that traced back to Damian's network. They'd stolen his work, profited from it, and left him with nothing. She found more designs Ethan had submitted to various companies over the years, all rejected or mysteriously lost. Each one revolutionary. Each one a solution to problems her company was currently facing. The battery design he'd tried to present was exactly what they needed to secure a military contract worth $200 million. Isabella sat in her office at 3 a.m., surrounded by evidence of systematic injustice. She thought about Ethan pushing her car in the snow, risking his life for someone who'd let him be humiliated. She thought about him going home to his daughter, to an eviction notice, to a life crushed by the very system she represented. Her phone rang. "Damian. Working late, I see," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I wanted to give you a heads up. The board is calling an emergency meeting tomorrow. Some concerns about leadership have been raised. By you, I assume. I'm simply a voice for shareholder concerns." "Oh, and that janitor Ethan Carter? He's been terminated. We can't have unstable individuals making scenes in board meetings." Isabella's rage was quiet, cold, decisive. "That was a mistake, Damian." "Was it?" "I think you'll find the board agrees with my decision." "Sleep well, Isabella." The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 4 p.m. By 3:30, the boardroom was full, the atmosphere thick with anticipation of a corporate execution. Damian had spent the morning showing executives carefully doctored evidence of Isabella's mismanagement. Emails taken out of context. Financial projections manipulated to look catastrophic. Isabella entered at exactly 4 p.m., but she wasn't alone. Ethan walked beside her, wearing the same modest clothes, carrying the same worn folder. The room erupted in confused murmurs. "This is highly irregular," Damian stood, his composure cracking. "This man was terminated. By whose authority?" Isabella's voice could have frozen fire. "I don't recall approving any termination. The board doesn't have that authority without cause. Mr. Carter is here as my personal consultant on a project that will save this company." She gestured to the screen behind her, where Ethan's battery design appeared in professional rendering. "This design solves our military contract requirements. It's revolutionary, and it's ours if we choose to accept Mr. Carter's proposal." "This is ridiculous," Damian sputtered. "You can't seriously suggest." I can seriously suggest that you explain this. Isabella clicked to the next slide: patent documents, email trails, evidence of Damian's theft and suppression of Ethan's work over the years. The room went silent. Or perhaps you'd like to explain this. Another click: evidence of Damian's sabotage of Sterling Industries. The leaked information. The orchestrated contract failures. Damian had gone pale, his gray eyes darting toward the exit. Sit down, Isabella commanded. You're going to hear what Mr. Carter has to say. All of you are. Ethan stepped forward, his voice calm, but carrying the weight of years of suppressed truth. 10 years ago, I designed an engine that could have changed the automotive industry. It was stolen, buried, because it threatened the wrong people's profits. But I kept working, kept innovating, because that's what engineers do. We solve problems. He opened his folder, revealing not just the battery design but 3 other innovations. These designs could put Sterling Industries decades ahead of competition. They're yours, if you want them. But only if this company commits to valuing innovation over politics, merit over prejudice. Why? One executive asked. Why offer this to us after how we treated you? Ethan looked at Isabella, then back at the board. Because someone once told me that a person's worth isn't measured by their circumstances. It's measured by what they do when they have the chance to make a difference. This is my chance. This is entrapment. Damian exploded, standing so fast, his chair toppled. These accusations are baseless. Then you won't mind the forensic audit I've ordered, Isabella said smoothly. Or the SEC investigation I've already reported. 2 security guards entered the room. Isabella had timed it perfectly. Damian Cross, you're suspended pending investigation. These gentlemen will escort you out. Damian's carefully constructed mask finally shattered completely. You think you've won? He snarled at Isabella. Then turned his venom on Ethan. You're nothing. A nobody. A janitor playing dress-up in a boardroom. He's an engineer, Isabella said quietly, stepping between them. A father. A man who saved my life twice, once with his innovation, once with his courage. He's worth a dozen of you. Security moved forward, but Damian had one more card to play. The board won't stand for this. Actually, the lead board member, Margaret Chen, stood slowly. We will. The evidence is clear. Mr. Carter, on behalf of the board, I apologize for our behavior. Your innovations are exactly what this company needs. One by one, the other board members stood not in ovation, but in respect. The same people who'd laughed at him now couldn't meet his eyes, ashamed of their prejudice. Mr. Carter, Margaret continued, we'd like to offer you the position of Chief Innovation Officer, with a starting salary of— I appreciate the offer, Ethan interrupted gently, but I need to think about it. My daughter gets out of school in an hour, and I promise to pick her up. If you'll excuse me. He walked out, leaving behind a roomful of executives stunned that anyone would prioritize a 7-year-old over a 7-figure salary. The scandal broke wide open within days. Damian Cross was arrested on charges of corporate espionage, fraud, and embezzlement. The investigation revealed a decade-long pattern of stealing innovations, suppressing competition, and manipulating markets. His network crumbled as co-conspirators rushed to make deals with prosecutors. Sterling Industries stock rebounded dramatically when news of Ethan's innovations hit the market. The battery design alone was valued at over $1 billion in potential revenue. The military contract was secured, and 3 automotive companies entered bidding wars for licensing rights. But for Ethan, the sweetest victory was smaller, quieter. The eviction notice was withdrawn. Isabella had personally paid his back rent and the next year in advance, calling it a consulting fee. Lily got her new shoes, her art supplies, and something more. The sight of her father standing tall, respected, valued. A week after the board meeting, Isabella stood outside Ethan's apartment building, holding a bag of Chinese takeout, and feeling more nervous than she had before any board meeting. She'd grown up in penthouses and private schools, navigating poverty only through spreadsheets and statistics. This was different. This was real. Lily answered the door, her face lighting up with curiosity. Are you the pretty lady from Daddy's work? Yes, I suppose I am. Daddy said you were coming. He's cooking, but he burned the first chicken, so now he's trying again. Isabella laughed, a real laugh that surprised her with its genuineness. Maybe we should help him. The apartment was small but warm, filled with Lily's artwork and the smell of Ethan's second attempt at dinner. He emerged from the kitchen, dish towel over his shoulder, looking embarrassed. I wanted to cook something nice, but I brought backup. Isabella held up the takeout bag. Maybe we can call it a team effort? They sat around the small table, sharing stories and lo mein. Lily dominated the conversation with 7-year-old enthusiasm, telling Isabella about her school, her drawings, her best friend Emma who could touch her nose with her tongue. Lily, Ethan said gently, let Miss Sterling eat. Isabella, she corrected. Please, just Isabella. Isabella is a princess name, Lily declared. Are you a princess? No, sweetheart. I'm just someone who's learning that there are more important things than kingdoms. After dinner, while Ethan washed dishes, Isabella found herself studying Lily's drawings on the walls. One showed 3 figures, holding hands: a tall man, a little girl, and a woman in a red dress. That's us, Lily said, appearing beside her. I drew it yesterday. Daddy said it was just imagination, but I told him sometimes imagination comes true. Isabella knelt down to Lily's level. You're a very special little girl. Daddy says I get it from Mommy. She's in heaven now, but she still watches us. I think she'd like you. Why do you think that? Because you make Daddy smile different. Not his sad smile or his tired smile, but his real smile. Ethan appeared in the doorway. Lily, time for bed. Will Isabella read me a story? Isabella looked at Ethan, who nodded slightly. I'd love to. As Isabella read about brave princesses and clever dragons, her voice taking on different characters, she felt something shift inside her chest. This wasn't a boardroom conquest, or a strategic victory. This was something she'd never had: simple, genuine connection. When Lily finally fell asleep, Isabella and Ethan sat on his worn couch, the silence comfortable rather than awkward. Thank you, Ethan said quietly, for everything. The job offer, the rent, standing up for me. Thank you for saving my life. Twice, apparently. I didn't know about the first time. The patent was stolen before I could. I know. I'm sorry for what this world did to you. It gave me Lily. That makes everything else worth it. Isabella studied his profile in the dim light. You turned down the CIO position. My daughter needs stability more than I need a title. I'll consult, help with the innovations, but Lily comes first. Always. That's remarkable. Most people would jump at that opportunity. I'm not most people, neither are you. The CEO who paid my rent, who fought for a janitor's dignity, that's not typical boardroom behavior. Maybe it should be. They talked until midnight about innovation, about loss, about Lily, about the loneliness of success and the richness of struggle. When Isabella finally stood to leave, Ethan walked her to the door. Isabella, he said, then stopped, searching for words. I know, she said softly. It's complicated. You're still grieving Sarah. I'm still learning how to be human instead of just successful. But maybe we could have dinner again? All 3 of us? I'd like that. As she reached the door, Lily's voice called out sleepily from her room. Isabella, will you come back? Isabella looked at Ethan, then called back. Yes, sweetheart. I'll come back. Walking to her car, Isabella Sterling, CEO, billionaire, woman who'd conquered industries, felt richer than she'd ever been, because for the first time in her life, she had something that mattered more than money or power. She had the promise of belonging. Months passed. Ethan's innovations transformed Sterling Industries into the most valuable tech company in the nation. But more importantly, 3 lives intertwined in ways none of them expected. Isabella learned to braid Lily's hair, to appreciate crayon drawings as art, to find joy in bedtime stories. Ethan learned to trust again, to believe that not everyone with power used it to crush others. And Lily? Lily got what she'd always drawn in her pictures: a complete family, different from before but whole in its own way. One evening, as snow began to fall again, gentler this time, like a blessing, the 3 of them stood at the same bridge where everything had changed. Lily was between them, holding both their hands, chattering about snowflakes and angels. Daddy, she said suddenly, is Isabella going to be my new mommy? Ethan and Isabella looked at each other over her head, a whole conversation in a glance. Would you like that? Isabella asked carefully. Only if she wants to be. Daddy says we can't make people stay, but we can love them while they're here. Isabella knelt in the snow designer dress, be damned, and pulled Lily into a hug. Then I want to stay, for as long as you'll have me. Ethan knelt too, wrapping his arms around both of them. Forever sounds about right. Lily giggled, her joy echoing across the bridge. Forever and ever and ever. As they stood to walk home, their real home, the one they'd found in each other, Lily asked one more question. Does this mean we all belong together now? Ethan looked at Isabella, remembering those cruel words in the boardroom. You'll never belong here. He'd been right. He didn't belong in that world of prejudice and greed. He belonged here, in this moment, with these 2 people who saw his worth not in titles or bank accounts, but in the love he gave and received. Yes, sunshine, he said, squeezing both their hands. We all belong together. And in that belonging, they found something rarer than success, more valuable than innovation, more powerful than any boardroom victory. They found home. The snow continued to fall, soft and silent, covering the world in new possibilities. Three figures walked together through the white curtain, their footprints side by side, writing a story of redemption, hope, and love across the fresh canvas of their shared future. Behind them, the bridge stood as a monument to the moment when humiliation became heroism, when prejudice gave way to justice, and when a single father's courage changed not just his own life, but the lives of everyone he touched. The city lights twinkled through the snow, each one a reminder that sometimes the greatest reversals come not from revenge or vindication, but from the simple act of choosing love over fear, dignity over hatred, and hope over despair. As they disappeared into the gentle storm, Lily's voice carried back on the wind, singing the song her mother used to sing, now joined by two more voices, imperfect, unpracticed, but harmonizing in the way that only true families can. They'd all been told they'd never belong. But they'd proven something more powerful. When you find your people, when you choose love, when you stand with courage, you don't need to belong to their world. You create your own. Asterisk, asterisk. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes in second chances. Comment your thoughts below, and let justice and hope spread. Remember, your worth isn't measured by what others say about you, but by the love you give and the courage you show when it matters most. Asterisk, asterisk. The glass walls of the Sterling Aerospace boardroom reflected the city's skyline like shattered dreams. Nathan Carter stood at the edge of the mahogany table, his weathered hands clutching blueprints that trembled slightly. His faded blue shirt, a stark contrast to the sea of Armani suits, bore the honest marks of a working man. Damian Cross leaned back in his chair, diamond watch catching the light as he gestured dismissively. "Don't touch that, single dad." His voice dripped with venom. "You don't belong here." The executives erupted in laughter. At the head of the table, Olivia Sterling sat motionless, her cold emerald eyes offering no defense, her red dress like blood against white leather. Nathan's knuckles whitened. Then, with quiet fire that silenced the room, he spoke. "Belonging isn't determined by suits or circumstances, it's earned by what you create. What happens next will transform humiliation into awe as a single dad reveals the strength no one expected, and a CEO discovers what truly matters." The morning sun struggled through the grimy windows of Nathan's one-bedroom apartment, casting long shadows across engineering textbooks stacked like monuments to a buried life. 6 years ago, Nathan Carter had been aerospace's golden boy MIT graduate, youngest lead engineer at Nexus Dynamics, designer of revolutionary propulsion systems that promised to reshape space travel. His colleagues spoke his name with reverence. His wife, Sarah, glowed with pride at company galas, her hand always finding his amid the champagne toasts and congratulations. Then came the Aurora project failure. The experimental engine Nathan had warned needed more testing exploded during a critical demonstration, taking $3 million and his reputation with it. Damian Cross, then senior project coordinator, had masterfully shifted blame through falsified reports and strategic whispers. Within weeks, Nathan found himself blacklisted, his security badge deactivated, his parking spot given to someone else. The stress triggered Sarah's hidden heart condition. She collapsed at their daughter's second birthday party, red velvet cake still uncut, paper crown sliding from her head as paramedics worked frantically. She died before reaching the hospital. Grace grew up knowing her father through his sacrifices. At 8, she possessed her mother's honey blonde hair and her father's analytical mind, often catching him staring at old blueprints while stirring mac and cheese on their temperamental stove. "Daddy," she'd say, climbing onto his lap, her small fingers tracing the technical drawings, "these look like star maps." Nathan would kiss her forehead, inhaling the strawberry scent of her shampoo, and whisper, "They were supposed to take us to the stars, sweetheart." She'd respond with the faith only children possess. "They still can." Olivia Sterling commanded boardrooms the way conductors led symphonies with precision, power, and an almost supernatural ability to bend others to her vision. Her platinum blonde waves framed features that belonged on magazine covers. But it was her mind that built Sterling Aerospace from her father's failing company into a $10 billion empire. She favored red, always red, the color of confidence and warning combined. Her presence made grown executives stammer. Her disappointment could end careers. Her approval launched fortunes. Yet at 3 a.m., when the city slept and her penthouse felt like a beautiful prison, Olivia stared at her reflection in floor-to-ceiling windows and saw hollowness. Success had cost her everything: soft friends who weren't afraid of her, Lovers who saw beyond her bank account, the ability to trust without checking motives. She'd built walls so high that even she couldn't climb down. Damian Cross viewed the world as a chessboard where conscience was weakness and empathy was leverage. His aristocratic features, sharp cheekbones that could cut glass, gray eyes that never quite warmed, made him look like he'd stepped from a fashion advertisement for predators. His silver-gray suits cost more than most people's cars, each tie clip worth a month of Nathan's rent. He collected people's failures like trophies, displaying them in conversations with surgical precision. Olivia Sterling was his white whale, the one prize that would complete his collection. He'd already begun planting seeds of doubt among board members, questioning her recent decisions, her emotional stability, her ability to lead through crisis. Nathan's unexpected appearance in the boardroom presented an opportunity too delicious to waste. Nathan's current job at Sterling Aerospace involved sanitizing the dreams he once designed. Each night, he pushed his janitor's cart through hallways where he'd once strode with purpose, mopping floors where he'd presented breakthroughs, emptying trash cans that sometimes contained his old business cards found in desk drawers and discarded like expired coupons. The irony wasn't lost on him. Neither was the necessity. Grace needed stability, health insurance, a chance at college someday. Pride was a luxury single fathers couldn't afford. The blueprints hidden in Nathan's apartment told a different story, one of brilliance undimmed by circumstance. During the long nights after Grace slept, he'd refined his original designs, solved the problems that caused Aurora's failure, created something revolutionary. But who would listen to a janitor? Who would believe the man who supposedly destroyed millions had actually held the key to the stars? The world had already written his story. They just didn't know the ending yet. The truth lived in encrypted files and hidden folders, in documents Damian believed destroyed but Nathan had secretly preserved. The Aurora project hadn't failed because of Nathan's design. It failed because Damian had altered specifications to cut costs, pocketing the difference while creating a paper trail that painted Nathan as the reckless engineer who'd rushed testing. The original design, Nathan's true vision, would have worked flawlessly. More than that, it would have revolutionized space travel, making Sterling Aerospace the undisputed leader in the field. Nathan had discovered the full extent of Damian's deception months after his dismissal. Hacking into archived servers from a library computer, while Grace colored beside him. The falsified test results, the redirected funds, the elaborate frame, it was all there, digital breadcrumbs leading to Damian's oak door. But Nathan had been a pariah by then, his accusations dismissed as desperate attempts to salvage reputation. The review board hadn't even allowed him to present evidence. "Mr. Carter," they'd said, not making eye contact, "the matter is closed." Sarah's death had nearly broken him completely. The investigation, the humiliation, the endless job rejections, he could have endured all of it with her beside him. But standing at her grave while Grace asked when Mommy was coming home, Nathan had contemplated darkness. Only his daughter's hand in his, small and trusting, had pulled him back. He'd made a choice that day: survive quietly, raise Grace safely, let the world forget Nathan Carter the engineer, become invisible, become nobody. It was safer that way. What Nathan didn't know was that his buried work had been Olivia's foundation. The fragments of his research that survived Damian's purge had been repackaged, renamed, and integrated into Sterling's next generation of engines. The innovation that made her company's stock soar, that earned her magazine covers and presidential handshakes, had originated in Nathan's late-night calculations. She'd built an empire on the bones of his dreams, never knowing the architect still walked her halls at midnight, pushing a mop bucket like Sisyphus with his stone, eternal and unseen. The aerospace industry was bleeding. 3 consecutive launch failures had shaken investor confidence, and Sterling Aerospace stood at the epicenter of the crisis. The latest satellite deployment had ended in a $50 million fireball. The footage replayed endlessly on financial networks beneath plummeting stock tickers. Olivia hadn't slept in 72 hours, her usually immaculate appearance showing cracks, a coffee stain on her designer dress, concealer unable to hide the purple beneath her eyes. Board meetings had become inquisitions. Damian, ever the opportunist, led the charge with subtle brilliance. "I'm not suggesting Olivia isn't capable," he'd say, voice dripping concern like poisoned honey, "but perhaps the pressure has become overwhelming. We must consider the company's future." Other board members nodded, sharks scenting blood in corporate waters. They spoke in euphemisms about fresh perspectives and strategic transitions, polite language for coups. Nathan faced his own countdown. The eviction notice taped to his door gave him 30 days past due rent finally catching up. Grace needed new school supplies, winter clothes, the inhaler that cost more than groceries. He'd already sold everything valuable except Sarah's wedding ring, which sat in his drawer like a promise he couldn't quite break. The janitor's salary barely covered survival. Saving was a fantasy for people with choices. The convergence was inevitable. Olivia needed a miracle to save her company. Nathan needed a miracle to save his daughter's future. Neither believed in miracles anymore, but the universe has a peculiar sense of humor about bringing together those who've stopped believing. Sometimes salvation comes dressed as disaster, wearing a janitor's uniform or a red designer dress, carrying mop buckets or corporate secrets, pushing people toward collisions that remake worlds. Nathan's reflection in the bathroom mirror showed a man wrestling with ghosts. Grace slept in the next room, her math homework completed with his help, her faith in him absolute and terrifying. The blueprints lay spread across the kitchen table, years of refinement, solutions that could save Sterling Aerospace, vindication in technical drawings and calculus. But approaching them meant risking humiliation again, meant stepping from shadows into firing lines. "You're still the same man who designed rockets," he told his reflection, but the words felt foreign. That man had worn ties, had spoken at conferences, had believed merit mattered more than politics. This man wore a name tag, cleaned toilets, had learned that the world respected bank accounts more than brilliance. Yet Grace needed him to be both the father who protected her and the engineer who could change their lives. The contradiction was tearing him apart. Olivia stood in her office as dawn painted the city gold, studying failure reports that read like autopsy results. Every analysis pointed to the same conclusion. The propulsion system needed complete reimagining. Her engineers offered band-aids for severed arteries. The board wanted her resignation letter. Damian wanted her thrown. She pressed her forehead against cool glass, wondering when ambition had become a prison, when success had started feeling like drowning in champagne. She'd built walls so expertly that even facing catastrophe, she couldn't ask for help. Vulnerability was weakness. Weakness was death lessons learned from a father who'd loved companies more than daughters, from lovers who'd seen her as transactions. The idea of trusting someone, of admitting she didn't have answers, felt like stepping off a skyscraper expecting wings to sprout. But companies, like people, couldn't survive in isolation forever. Even queens needed knights, even if they came in unexpected armor. Grace found the newspaper article while researching a school project about space. Her father's younger face stared back. Standing beside a rocket engine, the headline reading "Young Engineer Promises to Revolutionize Space Travel." She recognized the hope in his eyes, the same look he got when explaining constellations, before remembering they couldn't afford telescopes. "Dad," she asked that evening, "why did you stop building rockets?" Nathan's hands stilled over dinner plates. "Sometimes, sweetheart, the world tells you to stop." Grace considered this with 8-year-old wisdom. Maybe the world was wrong. The presentation had been Damian's trap, perfectly orchestrated. He'd heard whispers of Nathan's late-night calculations, seen him studying technical manuals during breaks. Through strategic manipulation, he'd arranged for Nathan to be in the boardroom during a critical meeting, knowing Olivia would be present, knowing Nathan couldn't resist trying to help, knowing exactly how to destroy him when he did. Nathan entered carrying more than blueprints. He carried 6 years of silence, of accepting blame for crimes he didn't commit, of watching his daughter count pennies for school lunch. His hands trembled, but his voice was steady as he began explaining the solution, his vision for fixing the propulsion crisis. For 15 minutes, the room listened. Board members leaned forward, studying his diagrams. Even Olivia's expression shifted from skepticism to interest. Then Damian struck with practiced cruelty. "Excuse me," his voice cut through Nathan's explanation like a scalpel, "but aren't you the janitor? The same Nathan Carter who destroyed the Aurora project?" The room's atmosphere shifted instantly. Interest became suspicion. Respect became ridicule. Damian stood, his designer suit making Nathan's faded clothes look even shabbier. "Ladies and gentlemen, this man cost Nexus Dynamics millions. He killed 3 test pilots with his recklessness. And now he dares stand here, pretending expertise?" The laughter started, small nervous chuckles from junior executives, then spread like wildfire. Someone mentioned Nathan's name tag. Another joked about mops solving rocket science. The blueprints in Nathan's hands suddenly felt like children's drawings. He looked to Olivia, hoping for something: recognition, fairness, basic human decency. Her green eyes remained arctic. When she spoke, her words were dismissive, each syllable a nail in dignity's coffin. "Mr. Carter, while we appreciate enthusiasm from all employees, perhaps you should focus on your actual responsibilities." Damian delivered the killing blow with theatrical flair, reaching for Nathan's blueprints. "Don't touch that," Single dad, you don't belong here. This is a boardroom, not a charity. We discuss millions, not minimum wage. Leave your fantasies with the cleaning supplies. The room erupted. Nathan saw their faces, tired executives finding entertainment in his humiliation, young associates learning how the powerful treat the powerless. He gathered his papers with practiced dignity, the kind learned from 1,000 small deaths. As he reached the door, he turned back once. The Aurora project didn't fail because of my design. It failed because someone cared more about money than lives. That someone is in this room. When your satellites keep failing, remember you had the solution in your hands and threw it away because it came from a janitor. The silence lasted 3 seconds before Damian's laugh shattered it. But Olivia noticed something in Nathan's eyes, not defeat, but determination. The kind that moved mountains or destroyed them. The Prometheus testing facility exploded at 9:47 p.m. Nathan was 3 floors below, finishing his shift, when the building shuddered like a dying giant. Emergency lights painted everything hellish red. Automated systems announced evacuation protocols while fire spread through ventilation shafts, fed by leaked rocket fuel. Nathan knew this building's bones. He'd cleaned every corridor, studied every blueprint taped to walls. He knew the executive observation tower, where late meetings happened. He knew Olivia was there. The evacuation routes were compromised. The main stairwell had become a chimney of smoke. The elevators were death traps. But Nathan remembered the maintenance shafts, the service corridors no executive knew existed. He grabbed an emergency respirator and ran toward danger while others fled, his janitor's knowledge becoming unexpected salvation. The heat grew oppressive, metal groaned and twisted. Somewhere above, people were dying. He found Olivia in the observation tower, trapped behind security doors that had locked during the power failure. Smoke filled the room like black water. She was slumped against glass that had started to crack from heat, her red dress now gray with soot, her commanding presence reduced to human fragility. 3 other executives lay unconscious nearby. The manual override required knowledge no CEO possessed, but janitors who studied engineering at night knew exactly which panels to remove, which wires to cross. Nathan worked with practiced efficiency, thousands of hours of maintaining these systems paying off. The door locks disengaged with a reluctant click. He pulled Olivia out first. She was closest to the smoke, then returned for the others. The observation tower's windows exploded behind them, showering glass like deadly snow. Nathan shielded Olivia with his body, feeling shards tear through his shirt, drawing blood he'd worry about later. The journey down was nightmare navigation. Nathan carried Olivia when her designer heels failed, guided the conscious executives through shortcuts only service staff knew. He used his knowledge of ventilation systems to find pockets of clean air, his understanding of the building structure to avoid areas near collapse. When a support beam crashed down, blocking their path, he remembered the auxiliary maintenance tunnel that connected to the parking garage, a route he'd used countless times to avoid executive areas during his shameful janitorial work. They emerged into parking lot chaos, fire trucks, ambulances, news vans already gathering. Nathan deposited Olivia near paramedics and began to fade back, but she grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. Through oxygen masks and smoke tears, her eyes held something new, recognition not of his face but of his worth. "You knew," she whispered, her voice raw. "You knew exactly how to save us." Nathan pulled free gently. "I'm just the janitor, Miss Sterling. I know the building." But she'd seen more, the way he'd analyzed the explosion pattern, the engineering terminology he'd used under stress, the precise calculations behind every decision. This wasn't just building knowledge. This was expertise that belonged in boardrooms, not boiler rooms. As paramedics led him away to treat his wounds, Olivia made a decision that would change everything. She would learn exactly who Nathan Carter really was. The investigation began that night. Olivia, despite doctor's orders, commandeered a conference room and her laptop, diving into personnel files with obsessive focus. Nathan Carter's official record was thin, hired 2 years ago, exemplary janitor, no incidents. But she dug deeper, pulling archived files from Nexus Dynamics, accessing databases that required CEO clearance. What she found made her hands tremble. The Aurora project documents painted 2 pictures. The official report, signed by Damian Cross, blamed Nathan for catastrophic design failures. But the technical appendices told different stories. Nathan's original specifications had been altered, safety margins reduced, testing protocols shortened, quality materials replaced with cheaper alternatives. The signatures authorizing these changes belonged to Damian, but they'd been buried in subsidiary documentation. Nathan had tried to stop the test, his emails increasingly desperate, warning of disaster. His final message, sent 12 hours before the explosion. People will die. This isn't about careers anymore. Please listen. No one had. She found more patent applications in Nathan's name, innovations that had mysteriously appeared in Sterling products 2 years later. The propulsion technology that made her company successful had roots in his graduate thesis. The efficiency algorithms her engineers claimed credit for matched his published papers from before the fall. They'd been mining his intellectual graveyard, building success on the reputation they'd helped destroy. The security footage from tonight's explosion was most damning. The blast originated from a section Damian had insisted on inspecting earlier, overriding safety protocols with executive authority. He'd been adjusting something near the fuel lines, claiming to check modifications he'd ordered. The cameras showed him leaving minutes before the explosion, his calm demeanor suggesting knowledge of what was coming. This wasn't negligence, this was attempted murder disguised as industrial accident, designed to eliminate Olivia and blame another failure on the company's struggles. Olivia's investigation led her to Nathan's apartment at dawn. The building's decay shocked her: water stains, painting abstract art on ceilings, stairs that groaned like mourners. The smell of poverty that no amount of cleaning could hide. She found his door and knocked, her designer heels absurd in the narrow hallway. Grace answered, still in pajamas covered with cartoon astronauts, her eyes widening at the elegant stranger. "Is your father home?" Olivia asked, suddenly aware she didn't know how to talk to children. Grace studied her with Nathan's intelligence. "He's at the hospital. They wanted to keep him overnight, but he said we couldn't afford it." "Are you the lady from the fire? He said you were pretty but sad." The honesty was disarming. Olivia noticed the apartment behind Grace, clean but worn, engineering books stacked like pillars, a birthday card on the table reading "World's Best Dad" in crayon. Nathan returned to find them at his kitchen table. Grace serving Olivia juice in their only unchipped glass, chattering about school while Olivia listened with genuine interest. He froze in the doorway, bandages visible beneath his torn shirt. "Miss Sterling?" She stood, suddenly uncertain. "I know the truth," she said simply. "About Aurora, about Damian, about everything." The silence stretched until Grace piped up. "Daddy, is she going to help us?" Damian's final play was masterful in its cruelty. He'd convened an emergency board meeting while Olivia was still recovering, presenting forged documents that painted Nathan as a saboteur who'd caused the testing facility explosion. His narrative was compelling: disgraced engineer seeking revenge, using his janitor access to plant devices, nearly killing the CEO he blamed for his downfall. He had receipts for materials Nathan supposedly purchased, edited security footage showing him in suspicious areas, even a manifesto created from Nathan's old emails, words rearranged to sound threatening. The boardroom transformed into a courthouse. Damian presented his evidence with prosecutor's precision while Nathan sat in a chair usually reserved for fired executives. Olivia entered late, still wearing yesterday's soot-stained dress, moving like she'd aged years in hours. The board members avoided her eyes, they'd already been convinced. Damian had promised stability, traditional leadership, an end to the chaos that followed her wherever she went. "The evidence is overwhelming," Damian concluded, his gray suit immaculate as always. "Nathan Carter is a dangerous man who infiltrated our company for revenge. His presence here threatens everyone's safety. I move for immediate termination and criminal prosecution." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Nathan hadn't spoken once, knowing his words carried no weight here. But Olivia stood, and the room stilled. "I have evidence too," she said, connecting her laptop to the presentation system. The real Aurora files appeared on screen, the unedited emails, the original specifications, the financial records showing Damian's embezzlement. She walked them through years of deception with CEO authority, her voice gaining strength as she revealed each lie. The security footage from last night played, showing Damian's suspicious activity before the explosion. "You orchestrated everything," she said, facing Damian directly. "Nathan's disgrace, the recent failures, last night's explosion. You've been destroying this company to seize control, killing people for profit." Damian's composure cracked slightly. "These are desperate fabrications from a CEO who's lost control," he countered. "She's been compromised by this man's influence. The fact that she's defending a janitor shows her judgment has failed." Nathan finally stood, and his words carried the weight of 6 years of silence. "I don't need Miss Sterling's defense," he said quietly. "But this company needs the truth. The Aurora technology Mr. Cross stole and corrupted, I can fix it. The propulsion problems you're facing, I have solutions. Not because I'm trying to prove something, but because it's the right thing to do. My daughter deserves a father who stands up for truth, even when the world prefers lies." He pulled out his blueprints, not the simplified versions from before, but complete technical documents. Here's how to fix your satellites. Here's how to prevent more explosions. Here's how to make this company what it should have been. He placed them on the table. Use them or don't. Believe me or don't. But know that while you've been playing politics, people have been dying. I've stayed silent to protect my daughter. I'm speaking now to protect everyone else's. The room erupted in arguments. Board members examined the blueprints, some recognizing the brilliance immediately. Others questioned the evidence against Damian. The debate raged while Nathan stood calmly, Grace's photo visible in his wallet, giving him strength. Olivia watched him with something beyond professional interest. This was a man who'd lost everything and retained his integrity, who'd been crushed but not conquered. The final vote was narrow but decisive. The evidence against Damian was too substantial to ignore. Security escorted him out while he threatened lawsuits, promised revenge, his composed mask finally shattering to reveal the predator beneath. The board approved Nathan's proposals, offering him a consultant position to implement his solutions, but Nathan declined. "I just wanted the truth known," he said. "I have a job already." Federal investigators arrived within hours. Olivia's evidence triggering immediate action. Damian's arrest made headlines: corporate espionage, attempted murder, fraud spanning years. His assets were frozen, his reputation destroyed more thoroughly than Nathan's had ever been. The man who'd built a career on others' graves found himself in a cell, his diamond watch replaced with steel handcuffs. Sterling Aerospace's stock began recovering immediately. Nathan's solutions, implemented by humbled engineers, worked flawlessly. The next satellite launch succeeded perfectly, the propulsion system performing beyond expectations. The board formally apologized to Nathan, offering him any position he wanted. He asked only for his janitor's salary to be doubled, and for Grace's college fund to be established. His humility made them more ashamed than anger would have. Olivia found herself changed by the experience. The walls she'd built were crumbling, replaced by something unfamiliar: respect for someone who wanted nothing from her, who'd saved her without expecting reward. She started visiting Nathan's apartment, initially to discuss implementation of his designs, but increasingly just to exist in a space where she wasn't CEO, where Grace called her Miss Olivia, and insisted she stay for dinner, where success was measured in laughter rather than stock prices. The other board members struggled with their complicity. Some resigned, unable to face how easily they'd been manipulated. Others approached Nathan personally, apologizing with genuine remorse. He forgave them all, understanding how power systems worked. How good people could do terrible things when fear and ambition mixed. His grace made their shame deeper but also offered redemption. 3 months later, the ceremony was small but significant. Sterling Aerospace officially recognized Nathan Carter as the true inventor of their core technology. His name added to patents, his contributions acknowledged publicly. He stood at the podium in the same worn suit, Grace in the front row wearing her best dress, Olivia beside her. His speech was brief. Innovation doesn't care about your title or your circumstances. It only cares about your willingness to see problems and solve them. Every person in this company, from the boardroom to the boiler room, has that capacity. Respect it. The applause was thunderous, but Nathan had already left the stage, kneeling beside Grace, telling her he was proud of her for sitting still so long. Olivia watched them, and felt something shift in her chest, a warmth she'd thought ambition had burned away. Olivia arrived at Nathan's apartment on a Tuesday evening, holding a bottle of wine that cost more than his monthly rent and a pizza from the place Grace had mentioned loving. The contrast should have been absurd: her designer dress in his modest hallway, but somehow it felt natural. Grace opened the door before she knocked, having watched from the window. "Daddy's making spaghetti, but he always makes too much, so you have to help eat it," she announced, pulling Olivia inside with childhood insistence. The apartment had changed subtly. Nathan's promotion to senior consultant, which he'd finally accepted after Olivia threatened to hire Grace as negotiator, meant real furniture, windows that closed properly, and Grace's inhaler always full. But the essence remained. Engineering books still towered, crayon drawings still decorated the fridge, love still filled spaces money couldn't touch. Nathan emerged from the kitchen, dish towel over his shoulder, and his smile made Olivia's practiced composure irrelevant. Dinner was chaotic perfection. Grace dominated conversation, explaining her science project with Nathan's intensity and her mother's charm. She'd built a model rocket, painted it red like Olivia's dress, because red means powerful. Nathan helped serve, their movements synchronized from practice, including Olivia naturally. The wine remained unopened, juice boxes were apparently the preferred beverage. Olivia found herself laughing at Grace's jokes, real laughter that started in her stomach, and erupted without calculation. "Miss Olivia," Grace said suddenly, serious as only 8-year-olds could be, "are you lonely?" Nathan started to redirect her, but Olivia answered honestly, "Sometimes, yes." Grace nodded sagely. "Daddy was lonely too, but he says I fixed that. Maybe you need fixing too." The simplicity was profound. Nathan's face reddened, but Olivia reached across the table, touching Grace's hand. "Maybe I do." After Grace went to bed, they sat on Nathan's second-hand couch, the city lights painting patterns through clean windows. "She's extraordinary," Olivia said. Nathan's pride was quiet but absolute. "She saved me," he admitted. "When everything fell apart, she was the reason to keep going." Olivia understood. "You saved me too," she said. "Not just from the fire, from becoming someone I wouldn't recognize." They talked until dawn about rockets and dreams, about failure and redemption, about the weight of other people's expectations, and the freedom of losing everything. Nathan showed her Sarah's picture, explaining how grief had taught him that love wasn't possession but presence. Olivia told him about her father, how success had become a prison she'd built herself, bar by bar, until she couldn't remember why she'd wanted to be inside. "I don't need saving," she said as sunrise painted the apartment gold. "I need someone who sees me as Olivia, not the CEO." Nathan's response was simple. "I see a woman who stayed for juice boxes and spaghetti, who laughs at an 8-year-old's jokes, who admits to loneliness. The CEO is just your day job." The truth of it made her cry small, surprising tears that he didn't try to stop, just handed her a tissue with the same calm he'd shown during the explosion. Grace found them asleep on the couch the next morning, Olivia's head on Nathan's shoulder, his arm protective around her. She covered them with her favorite blanket, the one with stars and planets, and made herself cereal quietly. When they woke, embarrassed and apologizing, she simply said, "About time. Daddy, can Olivia stay for breakfast?" The question carried weight beyond pancakes. The photo appeared in business magazines 6 months later, Nathan Carter and Olivia Sterling at the launch of Sterling's new satellite, Grace between them holding a model rocket. The headline read, "From Janitor to Revolutionary, the man who saved Sterling Aerospace." But the real story was, in their eyes, Nathan looking at Grace with father's pride. Grace grinning at the camera with pure joy, and Olivia looking at both of them like she'd finally found home. Nathan still worked late sometimes, but now in a proper office, solving problems that mattered. Olivia still ran her company with brilliance, but tempered with humanity learned from a man who'd mopped her floors. Grace grew up knowing that dignity didn't come from titles, that love mattered more than money, that sometimes the world was wrong, and you had to prove it, one blueprint at a time. The janitor who didn't belong had become the heart of an empire, not through conquest but through quiet courage. The CEO who had everything discovered what she'd been missing in a modest apartment over spaghetti and juice boxes. And an 8-year-old girl proved that wisdom didn't require age, just the ability to see people for who they really were. The red dress and the faded shirt hung in the same closet now, side by side, telling a story about how humiliation became honor, how isolation became family, how a single dad who didn't belong showed the world that belonging wasn't about where you came from. It was about where you chose to stand when everything was on fire, and who you chose to save when saving yourself would have been easier. Grace's rocket model sat on Olivia's desk at Sterling Aerospace, painted red, reaching for stars that no longer seemed impossibly far. Sometimes employees would ask about it, and she'd tell them about a janitor who saved a company, a daughter who saved a father, and how the most valuable things in life were often disguised as ordinary people doing extraordinary things, when no one was watching. The company motto changed that year. Instead of reaching beyond, it became Nathan's words from that terrible boardroom day. "Belonging isn't determined by suits or circumstances, it's earned by what you create." Every employee from CEO to janitor received the same plaque with those words. Some said it was just corporate messaging, but those who'd been there, who'd witnessed the fall and rise of Nathan Carter, knew it was a promise, that every person mattered, that every voice deserved hearing. That revolution sometimes pushed a mop bucket before it launched rockets. And in a modest apartment that had become a home, 3 people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their separate lives, built something stronger than any boardroom or bank account could contain, a family forged from humiliation and hope. Tested by fire and triumph, bound by the simplest and strongest force in any universe. Love that saw past titles to truth, past circumstances to souls, past what the world said you were to who you chose to become. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes in second chances. Leave your thoughts below, and let hope travel far.